Namaskar, everyone. I am having the pleasure of having with us Mr. Mahesh Ramamoorthy, who is the CIO of Yes Bank. Welcome you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you are a highly seasoned professional in this banking sector. You have worked in the banking sector, like gone out of it and worked with the technology companies globally, and returned back again in the BFSI sector as a CIO. So, how you have seen this whole change in the sector in last decade, and how is the next 5 years looking like, and what are the changes coming, which you are seeing?
Thank you for giving this opportunity. In my mind, I think the last half a decade has seen significant change in the adoption of technology within banking. Uh, in a way, if you see, payments has made a huge change, which means the adoption of UPI, NEFT, RTGS, and NACH, or different kinds of payments, IMPS, right? It started with IMPS, moved to UPI. So to me, I think that has made a significant shift in how people transact. With the advent of digital public infrastructure, whether it is Aadhaar, whether it is in terms of PAN, or whether it is in terms of GST, ITR, and with account aggregator now coming in, I think there is a huge adoption by banks to go digital. And digital is in multiple ways, is in terms of digital experiences in the front end. How do you create new experiences? And in journeys, whether it is an onboarding or in terms of servicing, how do you use the digital public infrastructure to smoothen the flow, to create more better experiences? So adoption of new age technology has been very well received by most of the banks, and everyone is now competing in that space. That how do you entice a customer? How do you give a customer better experience and enable faster services? So to me, I think these two are good, significant. The third thing that is coming in is the fact that people have realized data is very important, and banks are the biggest owners of data, because anything you transact, anything you do is there with the bank. So banks earlier never knew what to do with the data, but now they have started to actively engage how to use their data, enterprise data warehouse, the analytical engines on top, and how do you create intelligence on top of that for management reporting, for product pricing, and cross-selling and upselling. I think these three have been significant shifts which have been very well adapted by the banking ecosystem for the benefit of the customers. That's the way I would put it.
And you have mentioned about the customer experience. You mentioned about UPI. Uh, if like while on one aspect, the UPI technology like UPI is making it easy for customers to transact, but it is also like raising concerns of frauds, and citizens like don't have that much experience of dealing with the cyber frauds yet, so they are also like learning on the way. So how are banks like thinking about that? They reduce this duping of customers, and what are the interventions banks are thinking about that we can take the steps?
It's a very important point that you brought about in terms of with the advent of digital payments and the proliferation of it deep into all forms, all ages of today our citizens who are using that. The risk has obviously become high and significantly high. And hence, the lack of knowledge of how to protect your asset, which in this case is your mobile phone or hence your money, is something that has been a bit of back behind the curve, which has led to a multiplicity of frauds. Banks, in its own, what they have started realizing, because they become accountable for frauds happening on their ecosystem, have started to bring in a real time, near inline uh, risk management practices. And that is not just about transaction, it is also about triaging with a lot of telecom operators, other data sources, which essentially tell them whether the SIM has been tampered with, whether certain other events have happened, and hence this phone or this origination of this entry is probably not the right one. So to me, I think while it is still some way off, but the fact that banks have started to understand how to manage digital risk and starting to build steps to mitigate it, use technology to adopt it better, I do believe that the number of frauds will definitely be controlled. I don't see a dramatic decrease, but I do see control. Obviously, what is most important is education, and education and making it simpler, which means that today most of the people, why it happens is because they don't know what they do and what permissions they give as a part of their mobile or handset that they operate. So I think it is going to be also imperative for institutions, financial institutions, to be able to help citizens understand, make it more simple, and make it more two-factor authentication, and make it more viable for them to use it. For example, if you do believe that something has been compromised, it should not lead to an emptying of their account. So you limit the damage. I think these are some steps that are happening. While the adoption has been very rapid on the UPI side, these are some downsides for sure. But looking at the future ahead, I do believe that some of the adoption of new age risk practices using technology, we'll be able to control it better. That's my take.
And I will like to ask about this the hype around AI. Now AI is across all verticals, all sectors of the society, and you are seeing one or the other usage of it, positive and negative, both happening. So how is AI as a technology going to impact the BFSI sector as a whole, both from a banker's perspective and second from the customer experience perspective?
I do see the advent of AI enabling drive better adoption of experiences and usage of data to be able to better interact with the customer. And I'll give you examples. Generative AI today is the hot topic. Everyone does it. But to be able to reach to a customer with specific campaigns, not just about campaign, but tailor it, run near real time for what he or she has done across. Use the data to be able to drive certain targeted focus marketing is a great example of how you can source more. If there is a branch service person on the contact center, if the person is able to answer a question for a customer without knowing the product, but looking at a lot of the documents that gets read and make sense out of it and present an opportunity, saying, hey, this is what you are, this is what we can do. That's what generative AI can really do some wonders. Credit processes, credit appraisal processes today takes a good 8, 10, 12 days, depending on what kind of product. But with generative AI and the ability for it to create its own document with intelligence, should bring that whole time down by, say, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Now look at that. It's going to create good experiences, create efficiencies, and that's going to be some dramatic change. So I do see some very, very good use cases coming up for banks. Banks are all in that stage of carrying out proof of concept. The downside is banks still are trying to understand what is the risk of data. what is the risk of where they are putting the data and how it can be misused. I think there is still some area of concern. So eventually we have to address it. And once you address it, I think the adoption will pick in a different way. So do definitely see AI and generative AI becoming an integral function of some of the experiences that financial institutions will be able to service.
I would like to ask you about that the whole idea of Aadhaar and India Stack has helped in technology adoption in BFSI sector in a big way, and it has transformed it. So what next? And people are talking about the digital public infrastructure, digital public goods. So how is BFSI sector use this concept of DPI, or how it is going to strengthen it?
So digital public infrastructure for a country as vast as us, I think we have done some fantastic work first. I think the government has done some really great work in making it available. Now, what's going to be important is there is a lot of information that gets captured. Now, I know that government is looking to the RBI and the regulator and the government are working towards creating platforms and networks which will now be able to analyze and bring the need to the to the institutions who can service the need. I'll give you an example. MSME, SME sector. The SME sector is so vast, and the ability for that to be able to be able to consume a lot of information and be able to say, this, if there is an open marketplace and that marketplace data is better managed by, say, a central body, and that central body creates a ecosystem of banks saying, hey, there is this institution, this customer wants this kind of loan. And this loan, this is the data that comes across. And this data coming across essentially is now available for you, ready for you to process and value it. I think that's going to significantly shift the game. And more importantly, you look at the fact that you have an OCEN framework, you have ONDC framework, you have an account aggregator framework, you have individual frameworks of Aadhaar, and you have PAN. Now look at a platform versus this. The combination usage of all of this and the center of which is a financial institution will just make the change. So I do see the ability for us to make some significant strides in that, going to make the big difference. It is early adoption. I wouldn't expect sudden shifts, but with ONDC coming in, bringing the supplier as well as the buyer into the common network, with OCEN being the infrastructure supporting it, and with the orchestration happening across by, say, RBI's Innovation Hub and everyone, I think the early mover banks, being able to bring all of this and use its own intelligence to provide those loans, small ticket loans, medium-sized loans, and be in the forefront of it, with scoring, all of that is going to make a big shift.
Asking you about the fintech sector. Fintech sector has exponentially grown in the last, say, 5 years or something like that, and there have been concerns about less regulation or over regulation in the fintech sector. How do fintechs collaborate with the banks? Are they friends or frenemies? Stuff like that, and the discussion happens. We are seeing some of the impact of the regulation in the last week. So how are you seeing this fintech sector dealing with regulations and collaborating with banks and overall fintech growth in India, if you want to talk about that?
So the way I see it is, fintechs have the opportunity to innovate in the front end. They create a very deep experiences for customers in a very narrow space. For example, if there will be fintechs who essentially do it in the personal loan side, there'll be fintechs who do on the salary side. Now they deliver brilliant experiences. Those banks go across the board products. So now the way banks always will have limited reach. So if banks can collaborate with fintechs, partner with fintechs in a way that the data privacy angle is taken care by the banks, the interaction with the customer is managed in the front end with the fintech under a certain guideline and compliance, I would see that the best of both worlds can be delivered. It is not that you will always expect a bank to deliver everything or a financial institution. I think those days are past. To me, the active collaboration and co-creation while keeping compliance and regulation in mind, because data is important. Data privacy is very important. You can't compromise. And that's the rock bed of everything we do. So to be able to drive this better and co-create is going to be the winning game. I think that's where I think we need to crack that. And I do believe that a lot of the organizations are starting to move in that direction. The persons who are able to do it fast, institutions who are able to do it, are going to be fairly successful.
And another question is about urban versus rural divide in the BFSI sector. A decade back, there was a whole discussion happening about key rural areas don't have that many bank accounts. Government took so many initiatives. Jandan accounts got opened. And our, I think, financial inclusion scores have grown by miles. But what are the rural needs versus urban needs in the BFSI, in the banking sector? And are banks thinking as much about the rural market or a rural market specific products compared to the urban sector?
I do see, the way I look at it is big cities have become crowded, right? Very, the service, the opportunity is dwindling from a retail perspective, correct? However, tier 3, tier 4 are areas where you do believe that today mobile penetration has increased. There are huge number of good fintech companies who essentially are in very niche spaces. Agri-tech companies bring a lot of advantages to the farmers. So they bring a marketplace for the farmers to say, no, when you should sow your seeds, what you should manage, when should you harvest, where do you get the seeds from. So they aggregate a lot. Banks definitely now have started to see the ability for them to collaborate with a lot, like I told earlier, in terms of such companies who can expand their distribution capabilities deep into. So it helps them more on the liability side as well as asset side. Because if you tie up with a fintech company or an agri-tech company who essentially are doing that, then you are able to lend as well as also garner the deposits from a liability perspective. Maybe small ticket, but then you are able to link it back to a purchase. So you are able to link it back to payables. So when you link it back, the whole, I would say, ecosystem gets connected. So I do see banks now starting to work closely with such companies. And I'm not just using agri-tech as an option, as one of the streams, but there are so many other companies who work in niche fields. And banks are today actively looking for such collaborations to expand their reach. Because being traditional banking, looking at BC-based correspondent model is probably done. Now, how do you sell insurance? How do you correlate the insurance to certain other areas? I think that's a lot of work to be being done. I do see that traditional models is being broken down, and hence we can see some good shifts there.
Last question to you, that you have worked with global payment company, and you have seen what all is happening in the global landscape in the payment sector and the banking sector. So, how do you see India vis-a-vis the global banking sector, both in terms of adoption of technology, customer experience, um, ease of doing business with a bank, and regulations and overall scenario?
I'm a proud Indian that way. That's my starting statement I would make, because today I think the way India has transformed itself from a cloud adoption or from a tech adoption has literally, we can see it in payments, we can see it in digital public infrastructure, we can see it with the advances in other areas. So to me, I think India is far ahead in terms of how it has utilized tech for adoption to service a very large citizenship, a citizen base, right? Population. And hence, to me, I think, and we possibly beat a lot of the developed countries in that. Where we possibly have lagged, and which is my conversation always has been that uh, we do not put more money in innovation of creating IPs. I think with now generative AI data, if we are able to use that and create some good IPs, I think that is going to be the differentiator for the next decade. The adoption, I think everyone has it, across age levels in different shapes and forms you've taken it. Now being able to use that and create good IPs and make that IP sustainable and be exportable is going to make the big shift for, because we are an intellectual capital. To be able to tap into that beyond manufacturing, I think is going to be the game changer for India. And I'm pretty confident of what's happening around. We're going to be there. And that's going to be the sustainable factor for us in our year-on-year growth.
Since you mentioned about IP, so like any IP across any vertical which comes to your mind, which is like a good example of showcasing innovation of India, and also it has the potential to expand outside India and becoming a global opportunity.
Yeah, I would say, let me put it, well, there are many examples crossing my mind, but innovation in the field of medical, I think health. I think today we have one of the very solid medical ecosystem doctors. There are medical tourism as big business in India, right? So we have good doctors, but the research aspect of it and creating certain capabilities, certain IP based capabilities that today can drive curability across various diseases, various other areas, is going to, and then make that available, patent it and make it available, is going to be a game changer. I would say that is one area. Obviously, I can talk a lot of examples, like if you talk of self-driving cars, but in terms of next generation of fuels, driving cars, I think we possibly adopt a lot. EV is a classic example, right? Sudden surge you've seen. But is EV the right technology for us? I think today we have some new age opportunities coming in, but possibly we are not innovating or funding that sector well. So if we take very good examples in those areas, food is another area, agriculture being the core. Now, there are so many opportunities for us to, an IP does not mean creating a software. To me, an IP is creating intellectual property that can be a game changer in either in the health or in the food or in any other sector, that can be adopted, adapted, sold anywhere in the world. I think that's going to be where we should, because demand supply can keep varying. But when you are an IP, that right remains with you. And that's the power that we should have using our intellect, I would say.
Fantastic. We can end this conversation here. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.